Hey y'all, and welcome back to another episode of Becoming No One. I'm your host, Big Taj, and today we'll finish Stanza 5. So just a quick recap, Stanza 5 is basically explaining the process of world formations, and basically it talks about the forms of the solar universe, a planetary chain, or a single planet. So we're going to jump right back into this one because it is super, super long. This episode might be a little bit longer than normal, and we'll start with part 4. So when I was doing my notes for this episode, y'all, it blew me away because it gave me so much clarity on a lot of different things. So I'm really excited to deliver this message. Now, part 4 says, fohat traces spiral lines to unite the 6 to the 7. The crown. An army of the sons of light stands at each angle, and the Lipika in the middle wheel. They, the Lipikas, say, "This is good. The first divine world is ready. The first is now the second world." Then the divine Arupa, the formless universe of thought, reflects itself in the shadowy world of primal form, or the intellectual, the first garment of the Anupadaka. Now, don't worry, I'm going to break that all down for y'all piece by piece. Now, part A says, this tracing of spiral lines refers to the evolution of man as well as nature's principle, an evolution which takes place gradually, as will be seen in Book 2 on the origin of the human races, as does everything else in nature. The sixth principle in man, Budai, the divine soul, though a mere breath in our conception, is still something material when compared with divine spirit, which is Atma, of which it is the carrier or vehicle. Fohat, in its capacity of divine love, the electric power of affinity and sympathy, is shown allegorically as trying to bring the pure spirit, the ray inseparable from the one absolute, into union with the soul. The two consulting in man, the monad, and in nature, the first link between the ever unconditioned and the manifested. The first is now the second world of the Lipikas, has reference to the same. So the spiral lines is representing the evolutionary cycle of nature. The sixth principle is referring to the universal soul, or the divine soul, which is the basis of all. This sixth principle is often used in conjunction with Amina Mundi, which is the oversoul, but it's basically like the same concepts. Okay, so this is the sixth principle is the feminine principle. Now, the seventh principle is the crown, and it is the highest manifested principle in the septenary chain. And the seventh principle is called Atma, and it is the masculine principle. Now, when it says the fohat, which is the electrifying principle or the divine spark, traces the spiral lines to unite the sixth, the feminine principle or the vehicle, which is also called the divine soul, to the seventh principle, which is the center of energy acting through this vehicle. This is describing the process of uniting the divine soul, or the intelligence, to spirit, okay? So the soul, divine soul, is the vehicle for this spirit. So just to reiterate, the divine soul is the vehicle for consciousness to act through, like the body is the vehicle for consciousness to act through, okay? Or for spirit to act through, okay? So fohat is the united force that combines the vehicle to the center of energy or consciousness. Now, consciousness is made up of 3 parts: our thoughts, our emotions, and our actions. Fohat is the facilitator to bring the pure spirit or the ray of light into union with the soul. Now, the Lipikas are part of the Dayan Kohans, which we talked about them, they're the karmic recorders, but they're Devas, angels, celestial beings who are in charge of karmic and cosmic law. When it says the first is now the second world of the Lipikas, this just means that the second world of the material world is just a reflection of the first world, which is the spiritual world. Now, part B says the army at each angle is the host of angelic beings, appointed to guide and watch over each respective region from the beginning to the end of the Manavantara. They are the mystic watchers of the Christian Kabbalists and alchemists, and relate symbolically as well as cosmologically to the numerical system of the universe. The numbers with which these celestial beings are connected are extremely difficult to explain, as each number refers to several groups of distinct ideas, according to the particular group of angels, which is intended to represent. Herein lies the notice in the study of symbology, with which, unable to untie by disentangling it, so many scholars have preferred dealing as Alexander dealt with the Gordian knot, hence erroneous conceptions and teachings as a direct result. The first is the second, because the first cannot really be numbered or regarded as the first, as that is the realm of Numenon and its primary manifestation. The threshold to the world of truth, or Sat, through which the direct energy that radiates from the one reality or the nameless deity reaches us. Here again, the untranslatable term sat, which just means beingness, is likely to lead into a erroneous conception, since that which is manifested cannot be sat, but is something phenomenal, not everlasting nor in truth, even sempiternal. It is coeval and coexistent with the one life. Secondless, but as a manifestation, it is still a Maya like the rest. The world of truth can be described only in the words of the commentary as a bright star dropped from the heart of eternity, the beacon of hope on whose 7 rays hang the 7 worlds of being. Truly so, since those are the 7 lights whose reflection are the human immortal monad, or the Atma, or the irradiating spirit of every creature of the human family. First, this septenary light. So this part is just explaining that the army of the sons of light are the builders, which are oriented based on their respective roles, and the Lipikas are in the middle, giving the go-ahead for the form needed in order for the manifested potential to live out the predestined plan, okay? Because remember, these Lipikas are responsible for figuring out the plan of the universe, like what idea we're actually exploring. So everything in this universe comes down to numerology, symbology, and the spectrum of light. So the first is the second is letting us know that the first doesn't really count because everything starts in the mental or spiritual planes first. And the first is the cause of the second, which is the effect of the first. So we live in a material plane, which is the plane that is solely the effect of causes that we cannot see, okay? So it happens first somewhere else, which is in the mental or the spiritual planes. Then we see it manifest in the physical. And as we know, the physical plane is not the truth. It's full of illusion. And it's only when we gain access to our higher or our spiritual self that we can see through these illusions. So the physical plane is just the reflection of the spiritual plane. So the first is the second. However, since it is still a manifestation, it is still considered the first because all manifestations are subject to Maya, meaning that we need to be able to designate it, or we need to be able to identify what it is. Now, part C says, the divine world, the countless lights lit at the primeval light, the Buddhas of formless divine souls, of the last Arupa, which is the spiritual world. The sum total is the mysterious language of the old stanza. In the catechism, the master is made to ask the pupil, lift thy head, O Lanu. Dost thou see one of countless lights above thee burning in the dark midnight sky? I sense one flame, O Gurudeva, I see countless detached sparks shining in it. Thou sayest well, and now look around and into thyself. That light which burns inside thee, dost that feel it is different in any wise from the light that shines in thy brother man? It is in no different way, though the prisoner is held in bondage by karma, and thou its outer garments delude the ignorance into saying thy soul and my soul. This part is just basically explaining how in the spiritual world, we are all one, right? Or in this universe, we are all one. However, once we cross over into the world of matter, there's an illusion of separation, okay? So the next part says the radical unity of the ultimate essence of each constituent part of compound in nature, from stars to minerals to atoms, from the highest diacohan to the smallest infusoria, in the fullest acceptance of the term and whether applied to the spiritual, intellectual, or physical worlds. This is the one fundamental law in occult science. The deity is boundless and infinite expansion, says the occult axiom, and hence, as remarked the name Brahma, there is a deep philosophy underlying the early worship in the world, that of the sun and the fire. Of all the elements known to science, fire is the one that has ever eluded definite analysis. It is confidently asserted that air is a mixture containing gases of oxygen and nitrogen. We view the universe and the earth as matter composed of definite chemical molecules. We speak of the primitive 10 earths, endowing each with the Greek or Latin name. We say that water is chemically a compound of oxygen and hydrogen. But what is fire? It is the effect of combustion. We are gravely answered. It is heat and light and motion, and a correlation of physical and chemical forces in general. And this scientific definition is philosophically supplemented by the theological one in Webster's dictionary, which explains fire as the instrument of punishment or the punishment of the impotent in other states. So the state by being supposed to be spiritual, but alas, the presence of fire would seem to be a convincing proof of the material nature. Yet speaking of the illusion of regarding phenomenon as simple because they are familiar, Professor Bain says, very familiar faces seem to stand in no need of explanation themselves and to be the means of explaining whatever can be assimilated to them. Thus, the boiling and evaporation of liquid is supposed to be a very simple phenomenon requiring no explanation and a satisfactory explanation of rare phenomenon. That water should dry up is, to the uninstructed mind, a thing wholly intelligible, whereas the man acquainted with physical science, the liquid state is anomalous and inexplicable. The lighting of the fire by a flame is a great scientific difficulty, yet few people think so. What says the esoteric teachings with regard to fire? Fire, it says, is the most perfect and unadulterated reflection in heaven as on earth of the one flame. It is life and death, the origin and the end of every material thing. It is divine substance. Thus, not only the fire worshiper, the Parsi, but even the wandering savage tribes of America, which proclaim themselves born of fire, show more science in their creed and truth in their superstitions than all speculations of modern physics and learning. The Christians who say God is a living fire and speak on the Pentecostal tongues of fire and of the burning bush of Moses is as much a fire worshiper as any other heathen. The Rosicrucian among all the mystics and Kabbalists were those who defined fire in the right and most correct way. Procure a sixpenny lamp, keep it only supplied with oil, and you will be able to light at its flame the lamps, candles, and fires of the whole globe without diminishing that flame. If the deity, the radical one, is eternal and an infinite substance, the Lord thy God is a consuming fire and never consumed, then it does not seem reasonable that the occult teaching should be held as unphilosophical when it says, thus were the Arupa and the Rupa worlds formed, meaning the spiritual and the physical worlds, from one light, 7 lights, from each of the 7, 7 times 7. Okay, so I know that was a lot of information. So first, let's talk about the part of the stanza that says, then the divine Arupa, the formless universe of thought, reflects itself in the shadowy world of primal form or the intellectual, the first garment of the Anupadaka. Now, the divine world or the Rupa is the spiritual plane where everything starts, okay, or the mental plane where everything starts, because everything starts as a thought. Remember, the universe is mental. So the thought is radiated in stanza 2 with the second logos. Then the thought is made manifest or reflect itself in the world of intellect. Our intellect is our mind, which is the divine soul becoming the vehicle for the spirit or consciousness. So the plane of intellect has to be the spiritual plane or the shadowy world of primal form. The spirit plane is full of shadowy figures, okay? They don't fully manifest. So the first garment of the Anupadaka, a garment is something that you wear, and the Anupadaka is the parentless, meaning having no material parent. So the Anupadaka is a self-existing or self-born entity of the divine essence. Now, this often refers to Dayan Kohans, but it feels like in this case, they're saying that everything starts in the mental plane, then it is reflected in the spiritual plane, and the spiritual plane is where the divine essence or the universal soul or intelligence is transformed or united with spirit. Now, the spiritual plane, since it's still invisible, we're talking about the astral realm, okay? It is still unmanifested, like meaning like it's not materialized. So everything starts in the spiritual plane, and then it's just like a copy and paste in the physical world, because the physical world is just the effect of the cause, and the causes happen in the spiritual plane and the mental plane. Now, the next part goes on to talk about the elements that exist in everything: air, water, fire, spirit, and aether. These elements correspond with the points on the Star of David and and our fingers as well. So every manifested being possesses all 5 of these elements, with spirit being the top point, because spirit is the most important of the 5. Now, this is why the sign for worshipers of the other side is basically a Star of David inverted, because they put spirit at the bottom, because they don't want you using your mind or your intellect. Okay, and they want you to basically be disconnected from spirit. So in this section, they're trying to determine the deity or the element that brings us into life, because we know each element is a deity. Fire sticks out because fire can create and destroy, right? The structure of fire is unknown and changes basically, and it has no bounds, and from one flame of fire you can basically ignite an infinite amount of other flames. Okay, so the unknown deity is supposed to be formless, boundless, and infinite in expansion, just like fire. So this is why the Christians say God is a living fire, and the cults say thus were the Arupa or the spiritual plane and the Rupa material plane worlds formed from one light that lit 7 lights from each of the 7 times, where one light can light 6 other flames, and many more up to infinity. Now, this is alluding to the assumption that the unknown deity is fire because every other element can be defined in scientific terms, but fire cannot. So basically, stanza 5, part 4 is the stage where the fohat is uniting the spirit or consciousness with the universal soul or intelligence, which is the vehicle for the spirit part of our being. Okay, the formation of the matter portion will come later. So this is confirmation that we are first spirit before we manifest as matter, which is consistent with how the whole universe works. Now, stanza 5, part 5 says, fohat takes 5 strides, having already taken the first 3, and builds a winged wheel at each corner of the square for the 4 holy ones and their armies, which are host. Y'all, this part is the good part. Now, part A says the strides, as already explained, see commentary on stanza 4, refers to both the cosmic and the human principles, the latter of which consist in the exoteric divisions of 3, spirit, soul, and body, and in the esoteric calculations of the 7 principles, 3 rays of the essence in 4 aspects. Those who have studied Mr. Sinet's esoteric Buddhism can easily grasp the nomenclature. There are 2 esoteric schools, or rather one school divided into 2 parts, one for the inner Lanus, the other for the outer or the semi-lay Chelas beyond the Himalayas. The first teaching a septenary and the other a 6-fold division of the human principle. From a cosmic point of view, fohat takes 5 strides refers here to the 5 upper planes of consciousness and being, the 6th and 7th counting downwards being the astral and the terrestrial or material planes, or the lower 2 planes. So this part is just telling us that the 5 strides are referring to the fohat already adventuring through the 5 upper stages of consciousness and being before reaching the 2 lower planes, which are the astral or spiritual plane, the 6th, and the material plane, the 7th. First plane being the highest and the 7th plane being the lowest. Now, part B says 4 winged wheels at each corner for the 4 holy ones and their armies of hosts. These are the 4 Maharajas, or great kings of the Deva-rajas, the Devas who preside each over one of the 4 cardinal points. They are the regents or angels who rule over the cosmic forces of north, south, east, and west. So the part where it says the 4 winged wheels at each corner, those 4 winged wheels represent the 4 Deva-rajas, often called the 4 Maharajas, or the great kings of the Deva-rajas. We talked about these in the astral plane episode. They are responsible for making sure that karma is delivered. So when we discussed them previously, we called them the 4 cardinal points, or the Deva-rajas. So basically what's happening is that fohat explores through the 5 upper states of consciousness and being before it gets to this astral plane and the material plane, where it unites the divine intelligence, which is the vehicle for consciousness, okay, with the consciousness. Then the 4 cardinal points are built, which are called the Deva-rajas, who are responsible for making sure that karma is delivered upon materialization. Now, these 4 Deva-rajas are called the holy ones, and they preside over east, south, north, and west, respectively. And they're not good or bad or even causing the karma. We create certain causes through our thoughts and where we focus our attention, which wakes up corresponding effects. Now, once we wake up these effects, we start to attract whatever we are constantly doing, feeling, or focusing on, because what our emotions, our thoughts, and our actions are the 3 states of consciousness, okay? And so those things are magnetized to us, which are a direct result of our state of consciousness, okay? Now, I said before that the 4 Deva-rajas have to be Lipikas because they deal with karma, but in my discovery for this episode, it seems that they are always discussed as being separate from each other. So I wanted to make that correction. Theosophy Wiki actually says, according to Annie Bassett and C.W. Leadbeater, the great karmic deities of the cosmos, called the Lipikas, weigh the deeds of each personality when the final separation of its principle takes place at the end of its astral life, and gives, as it were, the mound of the etheric double, exactly suitable to its karma for the man's next birth. Okay, so basically the Lipikas are the ones at the end who kind of like do this life review, but the Deva-rajas, who having command over the elements of which the etheric double must be composed, arrange their portions so that they fulfill accurately the intentions of the Lipika. Now, the Lipikas, remember, they are responsible for the divine plan, not only of the planet, but also of individual people. So the Deva-rajas are basically underneath in hierarchy the Lipikas, because they're basically helping them to orchestrate the plan. The next part says east and west forces have each a distinct occult property. These beings are also connected with karma, as the latter need physical and material agents to carry out her decree. This is the Lipikas need people to carry this out, okay? So such as the 4 kinds of winds, for instance, professedly admitted by science to have their respective evil and beneficent influences upon the health of mankind and every living thing. There is a cult philosophy in that Roman Catholic doctrine which traces the various public calamities, such as epidemics of disease and war and so on, to this invisible messenger from the north and west. So it says the glory of God comes from the way of the east, says Ezekiel, while Jeremiah, Isaiah, and the psalmist assure their readers that all of the evil under the sun comes from the north and the west, which proportions, when applied to the Jewish nation, sounds like an undeniable prophecy for themselves. And this accounts also for St. Ambrose, declaring that it is precisely for that reason that we curse the north winds, and that during the ceremony of baptism, we begin by turning towards the west to renounce the better him who inhabits it, after which we turn to the east, which is basically because of the belief of the 4 Maharajas, which are the Deva-rajas. So the regions of the 4 cardinal points was universal and is now that of Christians, who call them, after St. Augustine, angelic virtues and spirits when enumerated by themselves, and the devil when named by pagans. But where is the difference between the pagans and the Christians in this cause? Following Plato, Aristotle explained that the term stoichia was understood only as meaning an incorporeal principle placed at each of the 4 great divisions of our cosmical world to supervise them. Thus, no more than the Christians do they adore and worship the elements and the cardinal imaginary points, but the gods that ruled these respectively. For the church, there are 2 kinds of sidereal beings, the angels and the devils. For the Kabbalists and occultists, there is but one, and neither of them make any difference between the rectors of light and the cosmicators or rectors, tenebrarums, harems, whom the Roman church imagines and discovers in the rectors of light as soon as he is called by another name than the one she addresses him by. It is not the rector or the Maharajas who punishes or rewards with or without God's permission or order, but man himself, his deeds or karma attracting individually and collectively, as in the cause of the whole nation sometimes, every kind of evil and calamity. Reproduce causes, and these awaken the corresponding powers in the sidereal world. The sidereal world is just the spiritual world, which powers are magnetically and irresistibly attracted to us and react upon those who produce these causes. Whether such person are practically the evildoers or simply thinkers who brood mischief, thought is matter. We are taught by modern science, and every particle of the existing matter must be a register of all that has happened. As in the Principles of Science, Messrs. Jevons and Bagage tell the profane, modern science is drawn more every day into the maelstrom of occultism, unconsciously, no doubt, still very sensibly. The 2 main theories of science, the relationship between mind and matter, are monism and materialism. These 2 cover the whole grounds of negative psychology with exception. Basically what this is saying is that east, west, north, and south forces have distinct roles, kind of like the 4 winds, which are often used to explain natural disasters, plagues, etc. Each Deva-raja makes sure that everything is going according to plan with respect to their distinct role. The effects are a direct result of the causes that have been set in motion. So the effects vary on the scale of good and bad. Now, there's evidence of this hidden belief in our religions and philosophy, and they explain some of those above in the paragraph we just read. The Christians often call these Deva-rajas the angelic virtues or spirits. Then they turn around and refer to these same deities as devils when pagans refer to them by a different name. So pagans are just people who use the elementals to their benefit, or what we would call witches. But again, these Deva-rajas are not causing the karma and don't decide whether the karma is good or bad. We are setting things into motion either on an individual level or a collective level. And these beings just make sure that we get the appropriate effects, because we are the creators of our reality, and we have free will to create whatever it is that we want to create, and whatever we choose to create. So the next part goes on to say, in the Egyptian temples, according to Clemens Alexandrinus, an immense curtain separated the tabernacle from the place for the congregation. The Jews had the same. In both, the curtain was drawn over the 5 pillars, the pentacles symbolizing our 5 senses and 5 root races esoterically, while the 4 colors of the curtain represent the 4 cardinal points and the 4 terrestrial elements. The whole was an allegorical symbol. It is though the 4 high rulers over the 4 points and the elements that are our 5 senses may become cognizant of the hidden truths of nature and not at all. As Clemens would have it, that is the elements per se that furnished the pagans with divine knowledge or knowledge of God, while the Egyptians' emblems was spiritual. That of the Jews was purely materialistic and indeed honored only the blind elements and the imaginary points. For what was the meaning of square tabernacle raised by Moses in the wilderness if it had not the same cosmical significance? Thou shalt make an hanging of blue, purple, and scarlet, and 5 pillars of shittim wood for the hanging, 4 brazen rings in the 4 corners thereof, boards of fine wood for the 4 sides, north, south, west, and east of the tabernacle, with cherubims of cunning work. This is Exodus chapter 26 and 27. So the tabernacle in the square courtyard, cherubims in all, were precisely the same as those in the Egyptian temples. The square form of the tabernacle meant just the same as it still means to this day in the exoteric worship of the Chinese and Tibetans. The 4 cardinal points signify that which the 4 sides of the pyramid, obelisk, and other such square erections means. Josephus takes care to explain the whole thing. He declares that the tabernacle pillars are the same as those raised at Tyre to the 4 elements, which were placed on pedestals whose 4 angles faced the 4 cardinal points, adding that the angles of the pedestal had equally the 4 figures of the zodiac on them, which represents the same orientation. The idea may be traced back to Zoroastrian caves in the rock-cut temples of India, as in all the sacred square buildings of antiquity that have survived to this day. This is shown definitely by Layard, who finds the 4 cardinal points and the 4 primitive elements in the religion of every country under the shape of square obelisks, the 4 sides of the pyramid, etc. Of these elements and their points, the 4 Maharajas were the regents and the directors. If the students would know more of them, he has but to compare the vision of Ezekiel with what is known of Chinese Buddhism, even in the exoteric teachings, and examine the outward shape of these great kings. In the opinion of Reverend Joseph Edkins, they are the Devas who preside each over one of the 4 continents into which the Hindus divide the world. Each leads an army of spiritual beings to protect mankind in Buddhism. With the exception of favoritism towards Buddhism, the 4 celestial beings are precisely this. They are the protectors of mankind and also the agents of karma on earth, whereas the Lipikas are concerned with humanity hereafter. At the same time, they are the 4 living creatures who have the likeness of a man of Ezekiel's vision, called by the translators of the Bible cherubims, seraphims, etc., and by the occultists the winged globes and the fiery wheels, and in the Hindu pantheon by the number of different names. All these Gandharvas, the sweet songsters, the Asuras, the Kinnaras, and the Nagas are the allegorical descriptions of the 4 Maharajas. The seraphims are the fiery serpents of heaven, which we find in a passage describing Mount Meru as the exalted mast of glory, the venerable halt of God and heavenly choisters, not to be reached by sinful men because guarded by serpents. They are called the avengers and the winged wheels. Their mission and character being explained, let us see what the Christian Bible interpreters say of the cherubims. The word signifies in Hebrew fullness of knowledge. These angels are so called from their exquisite knowledge and were therefore used for the punishment of men who affected divine knowledge. Very well, and vague as the information is, it shows that the cherubim placed at the gate of the Garden of Eden after the fall suggests that the venerable interpreters, the idea of punishment connected with forbidden science or divine knowledge, one that genuinely led to another fall, that of gods or a god in man's estimation. But as the good old Cruden knew not of karma, he may be forgiven, yet the allegory is suggestive. From Meru, the adobe of gods, to Eden, the distance is very small, and from the Hindu serpents to the Ophite cherubim, the 3rd out of the 7 of which was the dragon, the separation is still smaller, for both watch the entrance of the realm of secret knowledge. But Ezekiel plainly describes the 4 cosmic angels. I looked, and behold, a whirlwind, a cloud, and fire enfolding it. Also, out of the midst therefore came the likeness of 4 living creatures. They had the likeness of man, and every one had 4 faces and 4 wings. The face of man, and the face of lion, the face of an ox, and the face of the eagle. Man, who was substituted for dragon, compare the Ophite spirits. Now, as I beheld the living creatures, behold, one wheel upon the earth with his four faces, as it were his wheel in the middle of the wheel. For the support of the living creatures was in the wheel. Their appearance was like coal of fire. This is Ezekiel chapter 1. So again, this is just illustrating the historical significance of the four Deva-rajas and how they were used to orient temples and structures as far back as the Egyptian times. Now, this may be hidden knowledge to us, but it is not hidden knowledge to them. The ancient Egyptians believed it. The Christians, the Catholics, the Jews believed in other ancient societies as well. And it's still in the text and can be found in the text today. Now, the next part said, there are three chief groups of builders and as many of the planetary spirits in Lipikas, each group being again divided into 7 subgroups. It is impossible, even in such a large work as this, to enter into a minute examination of even the 3 principal groups, as it would demand an extra volume. The builders are the representatives of the first mind-born entities, therefore of the primeval Rishi Parajapati. Also the 7 great gods of Egypt, of which Osiris is the chief, of the 7 Amshaspids of the Zoroastrians, with Ormazad at their head, or the 7 spirits of the face, the 7 Sephiroth, separated from the first triad. They build, or rather rebuild, every system after the night. The second group of builders is the architect of our planetary chain exclusively, and the third, the progenitors of our humanity, the macrocosm prototype for the microcosm. Now, the planetary spirits are the informing spirits of the stars in general and of the planets especially. They rule the destinies of men who are all born under one of the other of their constellations. The second and third group pertaining to other systems have the same function and all rule various departments in nature. In the Hindu exoteric pantheon, they are the guardian deities who preside over the 8 points of the compass, the 4 cardinal points and the 4 intermediate points, and are called the Lokapalas, supporters and guardians of the world, in our visible cosmos, of which Indras, or east, Yama, south, Varuna, west, and Kuvera, north, are the chief. Their elephants and their spouses pertaining, of course, to fancy and afterthought, though all of them have the occult significance. The Lipikas, a description of whom is given in the commentary of stanza 4, number 6, are the spirits of the universe, whereas the builders are only our own planetary deities. The formers belong to the most occult portions of cosmogenesis, which cannot be given here. Whether the adept, even the highest, know this angelic order in the completeness of its triple degree, or only the lower ones, connected with the records of our world, is something which the writer is unprepared to say, and she would incline rather to the latter supposition. Of its higher grade, one thing only is taught. The Lipikas are connected with karma, being its direct recorder. Basically, what you really want to know out of this section is that the builders are responsible for making sure that structure is in place. The builders include the planetary spirits and the Lipikas. The skinny of it is that there are 3 groups of builders. The first group build every system when the activity period starts or the manaventaric dawn starts. The second group solely focuses on building the planetary chain. Okay, these are called planetary spirits, which are our worlds. And then the third builders form and build us, mankind, in the likeness of the macrocosm. So the planetary spirits rule the destiny of men. Planetary spirits are the spirits that handle each planet. And as we know, each planet has a specific archetype, which typically affects us based on where the constellations are in the sky when we're born, but also where they are on a day-to-day basis. So the planetary spirits handle this portion, and they also rule over various parts of nature, where the Lipikas are the recorders of karma and implement the divine plan. All these combined are armies of the 4 Deva-rajas, or the holy ones mentioned in this stanza. So just to recap, this part 5 is telling us that the fohat does its work on the higher 5 planes of consciousness and being before reaching the 6th spiritual and the 7th material plane, where it is uniting spirit with divine intelligence, its vehicle. Then the 4 Deva-rajas enter the picture. They govern over the north, south, east, and west. They have distinct roles, which would take too long to explain, but now we just need to know that they make sure that we receive the effects of the causes that we set in motion, or the karma of our states of consciousness, which are action, thoughts, and emotion. With them, they have an army of hosts, which are the 3 types of celestial beings: the builders, the planetary spirits, and the Lipikas. The builders form the system and help to build the planetary chain and form the shape of mankind. The planetary spirits rule over the planetary archetypes and the zodiacs, our energetic design, and the energies that affect us based on the location and time of birth. And the Lipikas record the karma. Now, the final part of stanza 5 says, the Lipikas circumscribe the triangle, the first, the vertical line, the cube, the second one, and the pentacle within the egg or the circle. It is the ring called pass not for those who descend and ascend, as also for those who, during the kalpa, are progressing towards the great day, be with us. Thus were formed the arupa and the rupa, the formless world and the world of forms. From one light, seven lights. From each of the seven, seven times seven lights. The wheels watch the ring. The stanza proceeds with a minute clarification of the order of angelic hierarchy. From the group of 4 and 7 emanates the mind-born group of 10, of 12, of 21, etc. All these divided again into subgroups of septenary, novenary, and duodecimals, and so on until the mind is lost in this endless enumeration of celestial hosts and beings, each having its distinct task in the ruling of visible cosmos during its existence. Part A says the esoteric meaning of the first sentence of the sloka is that those who have been called Lipikas, the recorders of karmic ledger, make an impassable barrier between the personal ego and the impersonal self. So the noumenon and the parent source of the former. Hence the allegory. They circumscribe the manifested world of matter within the ring pass not. This world is the symbol, objective, of the one divided into the many on the planes of illusion of Adi, the first, or of Eka, the one. And this one is the collective aggregate or totality of the principal creators or architects of this visible universe. In Hebrew occultism, their name is both Akath, feminine one, and Akkad, one again, but masculine. The monotheists have taken and are still taking advantage of the profound esotericism of Kabbalah to apply the name by which the one supreme essence is known to its manifestation, the Sephiroth Elohim, and call it Jehovah. But this is quite arbitrary and against all reason and logic, as the term Elohim is a plural noun, identical with the plural word Chem, often compounded with the Elohim. Moreover, in occult metaphysics, there are, properly speaking, two ones. The one of the unreachable plane of absoluteness and infinity on which no speculation is possible, and the second one on the plane of emanations. The former can neither emanate nor be divided, as it is the eternal, absolute, and immutable, and the second being, so to speak, the reflection of the first one, for it is the logos or the iswara in the world of illusions or universe of illusions, can do all of this. It emanates from itself as the upper Sephirothal triad emanates the lower seven Sephiroth. The seven rays, or the Daihan Kohans, in other words, the homogeneous becomes the heterogeneous. The protile differentiates into elements, but these, unless they return into their primal elements, can never cross beyond the Leia or the 0 point. Hence the allegory. The Lipikas separate the world or plane of pure spirit from that of matter. Those who descend and ascend, the incarnated monads, are men striving towards purification and ascending, but still not having quite reached the goal, may cross this circle of past not only on the day of be with us, the day when man, freeing himself from the trammels of ignorance and recognizing fully the non-separateness of ego within his personality, erroneously regards as his own for the universal ego, amina supra mundi, merges thereby into the one essence to become not only one with us, the manifested universal lives, which are one life, but that very life itself. So this part is just actually saying that the Lipikas are the reason that there's a separation between the spiritual world and the physical world, and they do that using fohat. So the idea of the one being divided into many comes from this separation of the higher self from the lower self. However, beliefs in monotheism, or the idea of one God, doesn't take into account the separation and how there are two ones, or what we consider to be the all or gods, because the one which is purely formless, infinite, and unreachable. And then there's also the one that is just a reflection of the first, but in an infinite state or a limited state. So an infinite God and a finite God. Now we are made up of the infinite divine soul or intelligence, which has been integrated with our spirit, but we are also material, which is just a reflection of that spiritual world and states of consciousness, because spirit is consciousness. So the physical version or physical God version of us is a creation of our thoughts, our emotions, and our actions. But monotheism, which is Christianity, Judaism, ignores our spiritual component. So the homogeneous meaning the one ray, which is the one white ray, once integrated with spirit becomes the heterogeneous, which is the many or the 7 rays of light. So it's like shining a white light into a prism, right? The white light goes into the prism as one, but it comes out of the other side as the 7 colors of the rainbow, or the 7 angles of light. The one becomes the many. Okay, so that's what that really means. Okay, so the Lipikas separates the plane of spirit and matter, which can never cross one another, so that one can descend and ascend again. So we descend into this illusion of separation, meaning that we are the 7 angles of light, having 7 light bodies which correlate with the chakras, when we are really one white light shining into a prism or a holographic matrix. So we are the angle of light in spirit, but in matter, we think we are 7 pieces of this light. We are in this state of separation. That's what they mean when they say we're living in this holographic light matrix, and that the illusion is that we think we're separate, but we're really one. And those who are on this path of purification or ascension only progress when they realize that there is no separateness. Okay, so that's through releasing their lower ego, which tells us that we are separate, and ascending to the highest version of ourselves by breaking through the illusion. So I hope that makes sense for you guys. Next part says, astronomically, the ring pass knot that the Lipikas trace around the triangle, the first one, the cube, the second one, and the pentacle to circumscribe these figures is thus shown to contain the symbol of 31415 again, or the coefficient constantly used in the mathematical tables, the value of pi. The geometrical figures standing here for numerical figures. According to the general philosophical teachings, this ring is beyond the region of what are called nebulae in astronomy. This is as erroneous a conception as that of the topography and the descriptions given in Puranic and other exoteric scriptures about the 1,008 worlds of Deva-loka worlds in the firmaments. There are worlds, of course, in the esoteric as well as in the profane scientific teachings, as such incalculable differences that the light of the nearest of them, which has just reached our modern Chaldees, had left its luminaries long before the day of which the words "let there be light" were pronounced. But these are no worlds of the Deva-loka planes, but in our cosmos. The chemist goes to the Leia, or the 0 point of the plane of matter with which he deals, and then stops short. The physicist or the astronomer counts by billions of miles beyond the nebula, and then they stop and fall short. The semi-initiated occultist will represent this Leia point to himself as existing on some plane which, if not physical, is still conceivable to the human intellect. But the full initiate knows that the ring past knot is neither a locality, nor can it be measured by distance, but it exists in absoluteness of infinity. In the infinity of the full initiate, there is neither height, breadth, nor thickness, but all is fathomless profundity, reaching down from the physical to the para-metaphysical, and using the word down, essential depth. Nowhere and everywhere is meant, not depth of physical matter. I don't know if you recall or not, but the ring of past knot, or the 0 Leia point, indicates the separation between the plane of spirit and matter. Okay, remember the circle of past knot is the circle that includes all the beings that are still being fooled by the illusion of separation. So the Lipikas are the only ones that can ascend and descend, meaning turning from spirit to matter and vice versa. The triangle corresponds to the number 3. The vertical line is the number 1. The cube is the number 4, and the pentacle is the number 5. So these are the geometrical figures that correspond with the numerical figures of the twice 7. Now, if you can remember, the first emanation, which we considered to be the archangels, or the divine 4, decided that they did not want to form the planetary chains or mankind. So another 7 was self-produced from the feminine principle, which are called the builders, also known as the Daihan Kohans, or the celestial beings. This is explaining the hierarchy between these beings. First comes those 4 cardinal points, then the Lipikas, then the builders, then the planetary spirits. The ring of past knot is an allegory. It doesn't actually exist, but it represents a point in the infinite where spirit and matter are separate, and the only beings that can go between the two are the Lipikas. The next part says, if one searches carefully through the exoteric and grossly anthropomorphic allegories of popular religion, even in these, the doctrine embodied in the circle of past knot, thus guarded by the Lipika, may be dimly perceived. Thus one finds it even in the teachings of the Vedanta sect of the Vishuddhadvaita, the most tenaciously anthropomorphic in all India. For we read of the released soul that after reaching moksha, a state of bliss meaning the release of bandma or the bondage, bliss is enjoyed by it in a place called Paramapta, which place is not material but made of the essence of which a body of Iswar or the Lord is formed. Their moktas or Jivatmas or monads who have attained moksha are never again subject to the qualities of either matter or karma. But if they choose for the sake of doing good to the world, they may incarnate on earth. The way to Mira Mapda or the immaterial worlds from this world is called Devayana. When a person has attained moksha and the body dies, the jiva or the soul goes to the Sukshama Seraphim, the heart of the body, to the Bhamarandra in the crown of the head, transversing Sushmna, a nerve connecting the heart with the Brahmarandra. The jiva breaks through the solar rays. Then it goes through a dark spot in the sun to the Paramapta. The jiva is directed on its way by the supreme wisdom acquired by yoga. The jiva thus provides the Paramapta by the aid of the bearers in transit known by the name of the Archi-ahas. The Adityas or the Prajapatis, the Archis here mentioned are certain pure souls. So basically what you really need to understand about this part is that in your physical incarnation, you can reach this state of bliss, right? Where you have a balance between the mind, body, and soul, where you have a balance between your thoughts, your actions, and your emotions, right? So you're existing in this higher state of being where you have manifested your higher self into this physical form. So the things that would normally trigger you don't trigger you anymore. And the things that would normally get a reaction out of you doesn't get a reaction out of you anymore, because you're existing in this state of constant peace and harmony and bliss, and that can be reached while you're incarnated in the plane of illusion. So next, no spirit except the recorders of the Lipikas has ever crossed into forbidden lines, nor will any do so until the day of the next pralaya, for it is the boundary that separates the finite, however infinite in man's sight, from the truly infinite. The spirits referred to, therefore, as those who ascend and descend are the host of what we loosely call celestial beings, but they are, in fact, nothing of the kind. They are entities of the higher worlds in the hierarchy of beings, so immeasurably high that to us they must appear as gods and collectively God, but so we mortal men must appear to them as ants, which reasons on the scale of the special capacity. The ant may also, for all we know, see the avenging finger of the personal God in the hand of the urchin who in one moment under the impulse of mischief destroys its anthill, the labor of many weeks. Long years in the chronology of insects, the ant feeling it acutely and attributing the undeserved calamity to the combination of providences and sin may also, like man, see in it the result of sin of its first parent. Who knows and who can affirm or deny? The refusal to admit in the whole solar system of any other reasonable and intellectual beings on the human plane than ourselves is the greatest conceit of our age. All that science has a right to affirm is that there are no invisible intelligences living under the same conditions as we do. It cannot deny point blank the possibility of there being worlds within worlds under totality different conditions to those that constitute the nature of our world, nor can it deny that there may be a certain limited communication between some of these worlds and our own. To the highest, we are taught, belong the 7 orders of the purely divine spirits. To the 6 lower ones belonging hierarchy that can occasionally be seen and heard by man, and who do communicate with their progeny of the earth, which progeny is indissolubly linked with them, each principle in man having its direct source in the nature of those great beings who furnish us with the respective invisible elements in us. Physical science is welcome to speculate upon the physiological mechanism of a living being and to continue her fruitless efforts in trying to resolve our feelings or sensations, mental and spiritual, into functions of their inorganic vehicles. Nevertheless, all that will ever accomplish in this direction has already been done, and science will go no further. She is before a dead wall on the face of which she traces, as she imagines, great physiological and psychic discoveries, but every one of which will be shown later on to be no better than that of a cobweb spun by scientific fantasies and illusions. The tissue of our objective framework alone are subservient to the analysis and research of physiological science. The 6 higher principles in them will evade forever the hand that is guided by an animus that purposefully ignores and rejects the occult science. So this part is just explaining that the Lipikas are entities from higher worlds and that science can only go so far as to determine what we are, where we come from, and the role these beings play in the evolutionary cycle, and that science cannot confirm or deny that other worlds or beings may exist outside of what we can scientifically prove. Okay, science can only go so far. Now the next part says the great day of Be With Us then is an expression the only meant of which lies in its literal translation. Its significance is not so easily revealed to a public unacquainted with the mystic tenets of occultism, or rather an esoteric wisdom of Buddhism. It is an expression peculiar to the latter and has hazy for the profound as that of the Egyptians, who called the same the day of come to us, which is identical with the former, though the verb be is in this sense might be still better replaced with either of the two words remain or rest with us, as it refers to that long period of rest, which is called parinirvana, as the exoteric interpretation of Egyptian rites, the soul of every defunct person, from the Hierophant down to the sacred bull, became an Osiris, was Osirified, though the secret doctrine had always taught that the real Osirification was the lot of every monad only after 3,000 cycles of existence. So in the present case, the monad born of the nature in the very essence of the seven, its highest principles becoming immediately enshrined in the seventh cosmic element, has to perform its septenary gyration through the cycle of being and forms, from the highest to the lowest, and then again from man to God. At the threshold of parinirvana, it resumes its primeval essence and becomes the absolute once more. This last part is just talking about the great day of Be With Us, which is just basically when the multiverse collapses within itself to move back into this period of rest or oneness. But during this period of activity, the monad must go through this evolutionary cycle of being and form, from the highest to the lowest, then again from man back to God, which once the God is reached at the end of the activity period, everything, no matter the level you have reached, dissolves back into this one. Okay, so in conclusion, the first part of stanza 5 is explaining the creation of the planetary chain which our planet exists in, which is done by fohat, which has two definitions. On a macrocosmic level, it is the love energy that emanates with the ray to direct the will of the universe, also known as the creative force of wisdom that executes the universal plan. It also separates the spirit or spiritual world from the matter or material worlds. On a microcosmic level, it creates the center of force on earth and with man, which are the evolutionary paths that we will follow to ascension. The second part of stanza 5 is telling us that the fohat does its work on the 5 higher planes of consciousness and being before reaching the 6th plane, which is the spiritual, and the 7th plane, which is the material plane, where it will unite the spirit with divine intelligence, which is its vehicle. Then the 4 Deva-rajas enter the picture. They govern over the north, south, east, and west, and they have distinct roles which would take too long to explain, but for now we just need to understand that they make sure that we receive the effects of the causes that we set in motion, or the karma of our states of consciousness, which is action, thoughts, and emotion. With them are an army of hosts, which are 3 types of celestial beings: the builders, the planetary spirits, and the Lipikas. The builders form the system, and they help to build the planetary chain and form the shape of mankind. The planetary spirits rule over the planetary archetypes in the zodiac, so our energetic design and the energies that affect us based on our location and time. And the Lipikas record the karma. So the Lipikas are also the Lipikas also divide the spiritual world from the physical world and are the only beings that can change state to go between the spirit and matter. Every other being will remain in the circle of past not, which is just basically this state of illusion or separateness until the activity period ends and we all go back to being one, or this absolute perfection. However, while we are in this state of illusion, we can expand our consciousness and ascend to higher levels, which help to remove the illusion bit by bit until you reach the state of perfection or God state. You will still exist in the lap of Maya, or this illusion, but you will be in the state of bliss where you are not subjected to swift changes in your states of consciousness, which are your thoughts, emotions, and actions, because they are all aligned. Now, I hope this episode brought about some major clarity for you. We're going to end the episode here. Next week, we'll start stanza 6. The resources are the same for this episode as last. So The Secret Doctrine by Helena Blavatsky, Theosophy Wiki, and The Secret Book of Daizan. I love y'all deep, and I'll see y'all next week.